I introduced myself a little bit earlier. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about the Energy Living Lab where I work and give you a little bit of an introduction to that and how it's governed and the different kind of roles in the Living Lab. Might talk a little bit about what is a Living Lab or what my view of what a living lab is. And then I'll give you two examples of two projects that I'm working on. One is called Sweet Lantern and the other one is called the Open Lab project. But I'm really going to focus in on capacity building and challenges and opportunities rather than like the innovations themselves or, the examples of what we're actually working on. So, our living lab was set up over 10 years ago, and we are actually members of the European Network of Living Labs since about 2013. But the view of what a living lab has changed a lot over that time, and there's lots of different definitions of what a living lab is. But we see a living lab as an innovation intermediary that's focused on co-designing sustainable energy solutions for social benefit. And we don't see a living lab as just a project, and we don't see a living lab as an experiment. It's much more a stakeholder network that does multiple different experiments and projects to solve different societal problems depending on what they are. But our particular living lab is very much focused on problems related to decarbonisation. And our motto is that we want to co-design an energy decarbonised and desirable future. We have two entities in our living lab. So we have the research aspect. So living labs can be hosted by a city, they can be hosted by a university, private sector, or even like associations. And ours is hosted by the university. So it's very much within this like hierarchy of the university. But we have also set up an association because we feel that communication and dissemination is really, really important for the innovations that we develop. But the university isn't really focused on that. So we've set up kind of like a spin-off association called the Energy Living Lab Association, which represents not just our Energy Living Lab, but many other living labs that are in Switzerland. We have a manifesto and we're very focused on stakeholder engagement, co-design, co-creation, doing that in a real life setting. So, actually getting out into the town and into the city of Sion is where we're based in Switzerland, and really listening to people and working with them and understanding their problem. We involve multiple stakeholders and they change over time. They come and go. And we have lots of different methods and we apply the methods depending on what the problem is that needs to be solved. So it's very much about orchestrating an ecosystem, we would say. We do lots of different projects. So I've just kind of thrown them all up there now. And they're some of them are very, very technical. They're about developing algorithms for smart control in buildings and developing platforms, etc. And others are very social focused. And actually, I'd say our probably unique approach is to do with the social innovation that we try to develop in our projects. So I'm going to tell you about two of these. One is the Sweet Lantern project, and the other one is the Open Lab project. And just to say, we develop a lot of tools. So this is a serious game called Energy for Citizens, or E for Citizens. And it's designed to be like an ideation game, a brainstorming game to work with different very different kind of stakeholders to try to get them to come up with new ideas on how they can decarbonize on a neighborhood scale. That's just kind of one example. We do have a innovation space where we're quite nomadic, I have to say. we work in different places depending on what's needed and who the partners are. But we do have a kind of a combined shared space in the university where we can do workshops and where we go and work a couple of days a week. So it's great to have that space. And we have found with lots of projects that having a really focused physical space for the Living Lab is really important. This place-based approach is really important. We work with this process. It's called the Living Lab Integrated Process. It's based on design thinking. And this is at the project level, or what we would call the meso level. And it really focuses on the problem space, empathizing with users. We identify a practice that we want to change, so like a behavior that we want to change. Then we integrate stakeholders, we define barriers, ideate, and prototype and test. So that's kind of the overall process that we follow. And this is used by lots of different living labs around Europe, especially in the energy sector. It's not a linear process. There's actually loads of iterations, and this can take up to 2 or 3 years to go through the whole process because of the iterations. But it gives us a structure to work with when we're developing these projects and developing these innovations. And a lot of them don't go much further than testing. There is a certain level of failure, and they don't all end up getting scaled up for whatever reasons. Okay, and then we integrate that into all the learning that happens in the university. So these are all the different kind of master's degrees and bachelor's degrees that are happening at the university, and we really integrate everything that we're doing kind of back into the learning of the university with the students. So that's really important, especially for the topic that we're talking about today. And I was asked to give you a little bit of an insight into the governance. So we kind of did this visual of our governance model. So we have Energy Living Lab on the left at the university, and we have the association. And then we have a citizen panel, for example. Also, we have Fabul, which is our innovation space. And we have, within that, you can kind of zoom in, and there's lots of different people responsible for it. Theoretically, it's supposed to be a holocratic structure where everybody is equal, but actually in reality, it doesn't really work out like that, because the fact is universities are very, very hierarchical. So as we say in Ireland, when the shit hits the fan, the hierarchy sorts out the mess. So we've tested having a holocratic governance model, but in reality, really, we do need a certain level of hierarchy. So that's kind of the governance model. And in terms of roles in the Living Lab, we have a Living Lab manager. I'm the panel manager and project manager. We have scientific collaborators. The communications manager is probably the most important role, but gets the least attention. And we have social science researchers. So that's kind of like the core team. But there's lots of other people coming in and going at different times. We have researchers coming from all over Switzerland to kind of, use our infrastructure and test with us in Sion. So that's kind of where the Energy Living Lab is. And now I'm going to tell you about 2 projects. So the first one is called the Open Lab project. It's a European project. It's in its 4th year now. And it's been these positive energy neighbourhoods are being implemented through Living Labs. So I've been working on this project since the beginning. So it's all about open innovation and having a Living Lab approach and doing co-creation. And it's not really bottom up, I wouldn't say, because the people's houses who have been renovated, they have arrived into the project really with no particular motivation or interest in having their house renovated. So it's been the Living Lab coming in as a kind of a motivator and trying to encourage these people to renovate their homes. So to a certain extent it's top down, but it's trying to use participative methods, let's say. And it's all about revitalizing Europe's urban spaces. There are 3 places where we're trying to renovate large neighbourhoods: Tartu in Estonia, Genk in Belgium, and Pamplona in Spain. So far, they've managed to renovate houses in Pamplona and in Genk. Tartu, they haven't managed yet. So, these are the kind of buildings we're talking about. So, like, some of them are very, in a very poor state. They're mixed between being publicly owned to being privately owned. And yeah, they're halfway through at the moment. But I've been responsible for the capacity building program. So that was setting up the living labs and their management across the three cities. We developed a handbook on capacity building and mentoring. So it explains how to set up a living lab. It explains all the kind of the theory and the methods and how to do it. So I won't show that to you today, but you'll get the links there, and it explains all the living lab methodology and how to do it. We set up learning modules. There was a lot of in-person workshops and toolboxes. So we have a co-creation toolbox, and we have all these different kind of ways to help the people in the project decide what they should do and when. And we really had then a tailored mentoring program for each of the living labs. Reflexive monitoring became very important. So trying to get people to assess themselves how to improve or get over particular obstacles. And there was also a learning network developed in Belgium, and that was really on a regional scale, focused at energy communities, because there was a huge amount of barriers to actually setting up energy communities. So a learning network was set up, and that was hugely successful. So that's what we did in Open Lab. And now I'm just going to talk about Sweet Lantern. So this one is a Swiss-based project. And we have about 50 researchers from all over Switzerland working with 5 living labs. And in each of those, there's the practitioners. Ours is down here at the bottom at Sion. So, but we also have a living lab in Lugano, in Zurich, Lucerne, and in Geneva. And they're working on a whole number of different topics about affordable housing, renovation, energy at work, mobility, energy communities, and smart energy users. So trying to basically co-design solutions with users. But the whole focus is on behavioural change and changing actors' practices, looking at markets and institutions, as well as the technical environment. So they're not just about technological innovation. It's really about people and changing people's behaviour. And it's all about renewable energy, energy efficiency and sufficiency. So really trying to reduce consumption and make people much more aware of their lifestyle and how they live and how they work. So our capacity building program, it's been running for about 3 years now, and we've been doing about in-person workshops with all those people 3 times a year. Initially, we started off explaining what the governance model should be and the business model of the living lab, and trying to develop a common vision and explain the difference between co-creation and co-design. We set up a big platform, which is basically in Miro. And it has like all the matrix of methods and stakeholder maps and this living lab integrative process that I may have mentioned. We've got intervention planning, and we do these systems of systems, socio-technical mapping, and all these different kind of really quite really interesting and interactive things. And then we have a website as well, which you can look at, and there's a full learning hub there. It has loads of modules. It explains all about how to build a common vision in a living lab, all about there's really a lot of stuff there, and really practical stuff like storytelling and how to do storytelling, and there's lots of use cases, podcasts, and it's all open, so you can go in there and you have a look at all of that, and it's all energy related, so it's all about decarbonisation as well. So that's our capacity building program. And I think this is nearly my last slide. But so just to talk about opportunities and challenges for learning or co-learning. The first thing is, what is a living lab? Everybody has a very different idea in their mind about what is a living lab. I think for the first 2 years, we had to keep coming back and rechecking in with people as to what did they think a living lab was, or what was a living lab, or what definition were we using of a living lab. And people are pretty much clear on that. They're not all on the same page, but the The next thing we're at now is what is an intervention? Because we would see an intervention really at this solution phase where you're like doing co-design, prototyping, and testing. But actually, other people think that if you're doing a workshop to define a problem, that that's an intervention. So it's really important to be clear about where people think, because even I can see in your own consortium there's people coming from technical backgrounds, architecture, buildings, as well as from public sector, etc. And really, that's a big challenge working with multidisciplinary teams. The other big challenge is working with stakeholders and trying to get them on board. They will always ask, what's in it for me? So you actually need people with sales competencies, being able to pitch, being able to explain things simply using simple language. And a lot of the researchers that are working with us, they're very technical, and they have a language, they use language that is not understood by citizens or by a lot of people who are not working in research or in these European projects. So the what's in it for me is really important, and the communication. Multidisciplinary teams, as I mentioned, different institutional logics. Some people think as positivists, others think of constructivists. There's all these different values that people have. So, we had a community manifesto, and really, we think we should have asked people to kind of like buy into that, sign that from the beginning. But a lot of people kind of jumped on the project at the start because they wanted to get funding, but they weren't really into the kind of philosophy or the community approach. So having these common values and approach to openness and trust really helps, because in a lot of these projects you're going to be working with people over 4, 5, 6 years. And conflicts do arise, and you need to know how to handle these things. And having a community manifesto really helps to bring you back to basics in terms of your values. Defining roles and matching the competencies to the roles. We've made lots of mistakes about putting people in roles or asking people to take on roles where they really didn't have the skills or the competencies, especially in communication, for example. And again, it's very hard to change people out of roles in these European projects, because they're kind of set in stone from the start. So I think that it's really important to make sure that the right people are in the right roles from the beginning. And then conflict will happen. So it's all about having procedures. I know that sounds a little bit dry, but you kind of do need a project manual from the start to explain what do you do in certain situations for non-performance and all that. So avoiding conflict is really important, and having structure in living labs. Then workshops. So yeah, lots of workshops. I would say start with individual activities, because everybody's coming from a different point of view, and you really need to let people express their point of view initially, and then do the group activities. If you don't let people express their points of view early on, then that can lead to conflict. So get feedback from any modules and any kind of learning material that you're developing. Get feedback using QR codes or Mentimeter, and really find out. We spent a huge amount of time developing material, and really we're not really sure if people used it or how they benefited from it. So that's important. And then, use games, have fun, be creative, and don't be afraid to try new things. And then cultural aspects are massive. So here in Switzerland, it's all about the apéro and the white wine at the end. That's super important. And in other countries as well, it's all about the food. In Ireland, I can remember us not having too much alcohol at events because it just gets very carried away. But I suppose it depends on what country you're in. But for us, having these drinks at the end is super important. And it's often when a lot of the discussion happens as well. So reflexive monitoring, try to have a systemic approach, and apply these different methodologies to really self-analyzing where you're going and what you're doing. It empowers people as well, so it's very important. And finally, do some research on the learning. So, how do you measure impact? How are you actually going to really measure the impact of not only the experiments and the projects that you're doing? So, have you got a theory of change? But that should extend also to the learning. So, there's lots of different theories and to do with knowledge and different types of knowledge, etc. But try and set up some way to do research on the learning. That because that's one of the most important aspects of living labs. Even if the projects fail, if you've learned, I think that's super important. So I hope that wasn't too much information. There's references there, and I think that Jetta will share the presentation with you. Anyway,